those tough days when it can be overwhelming, sometimes it's just the simplest thing. I know sometimes I'll I'm here at home. It's basically just me and the cats, and I'll get into it. And some days are better than others when it comes down to dealing with stress. And Lucy will come up and drop the little play mouse that she likes to play with and give this meow, and she's just the happiest thing in the world just to play with this little toy mouse. And it just brings me. I'm like, wow. Here I am, like out of my head about thinking all these things, and I'm like, all this little creature wants is this little toy mouse and make her completely happy. Hey everybody, welcome back to EventSpeak with me, Big John, CEO of Beyond Experiential. Our guest today is a friend of the family, if you will. Our brethren at Evolve have been working with Matt and Blaze PR for quite some time. We're excited to have him on the show. Matt Kovacs, president of Blaze PR, joining us right now. Welcome to EventSpeak. Matt, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you.
Yes, man, absolutely. JT and Fox just spoke so highly of you, and and I've heard them mention Blaze a bunch of different times. And I think that actually diving right into the conversation, I feel like PR really plays a very key role, in the experiential space. I think we see a lot of times where experiential agencies or ad agencies that are working directly with a PR firm as they're rolling out an inclusive, marketing plan kind of a thing. Take us through the journey of how you ended up president of Blaze PR. Give us a little bit of background on you there.
Sure. Again, my background started went to USC, graduated, with my PR degree, had some internships along the way, lived in Chicago for a number of years and worked in PR there. For Chet Kopic,
Really?
if you remember Chet, and then worked at Levi's for a number of years, and then Lids, helped launch the hat retailer there. So have worked in house, understood agencies and that side, and then came back out to Los Angeles and worked at an agency called Formula for about 10 years, and then I've been at Blaze for 10 years as well. So really, understanding that lifestyle aspect and from a PR evolution, I can remember back when, you had the fax machines and the 5-page press release that had to have everything in it. And now it's a simple text and a reporter, will get going. But I think that's been the journey. And, we look at it, I think to your earlier point, the relationship with experiential and sampling and just street teams and all those things is so invaluable for a PR agency, because we can, in theory, talk to a reporter, talk to a journalist about the brands, the events, but that's really where the elements happen with consumers. That engagement and the belief and the trust is really down there, and I think that's something that, again, having worked with the Evolve team forever, just understanding what that can do for any brand.
Absolutely. It's small world, if you will. I grew up in Chicago, and let's see, I've been in LA now for just about a little over 16 years. Okay. But got my start, in the experiential game there, being a brand ambassador, and back in the days when entertainment marketing and KBA marketing were the big agencies in Chicago. And, it's always interesting to me to hear people's stories of how they got introduced into brand marketing. And while brand marketing and PR, obviously, as we said, go hand in hand, I feel like it takes someone in your position to really understand the nuances of how to take what a brand is trying to get across. Because, where we're more in the activation side of taking ideas that folks like you guys come up with, you're working directly with these brands and figuring out how the character of those brands is going to be conveyed to their consumers. So, I'm curious of all of the, you mentioned it. I'm sure you've been working with a lot of different brands over the years, from Marriott to Newcastle. Is there any one particular brand that really stood out to you that was, whether it was because it was a challenge or whether it was because it was just such maybe a fun client to work with, meaning that they were really creative and willing to kind of think outside the box. What would be your standouts, if you will, and if you could tell us that?
Sure. I think a fun one, and it's one, again, not to go back into the, with the team, but Youtheory. I think the Youtheory brand that we've worked on, they've been a client for about 7 years now, but it's something that you really look at, from their background, their base is in collagen. That's where they started. That's where everything is. And you think of it very much trapped in the beauty space. But what we've been able to do and really working with them, the opportunities, they do a lot in NASCAR, with the Anaheim Angels, with the Toronto Maple Leafs, being able to build a beauty brand out to be much more now where it is part of the lexicon of so much of what supplements can do. So, from the turmeric, be it the immune product, and having so many opportunities to take them in different ways. And, again, from their street teams or from their, marketing events, really being able to build that into a brand name beyond just, in the beauty space. I think that's been a fun element for us, and so many layers to it. So dealing with retail, being able to engage with, be it the Sprouts or the Costco, marketing teams to see how, things we can do at retail, and then going through, with working with different partners like Goop and Well and Good, and, what can we do with, with those types of pop-ups and activations that really reach different consumers, all the way through, some of the sports marketing elements where, you look at a brand that hits all those layers. It's really a way, from a PR person's perspective, that's a dream. You're able to come out and come at so many different ways to be able to tell that story and not feel that you're hitting the same, group of media again and again and again. You're able to expand that reach. And then also, it's family owned, still a family business. So you're able to really do, the great CEO profiles and presence on their co-founders, be able to tell that story, and where media then feel like they're part of the story and they're part of that team and part of the elements. So you're able to drive into that, and as well as at all the different trade shows. You see all your friends, all the different, media friends, and have them be able to, become part of that story, and that, 2-3 times a year that you're engaged with them as well. I think that's one that I really look at and am able to, wax poetic forever about, because we've done so much with them, and they keep growing. I think that's what's fun is to be part of that sort of rocket ship type brand that can, still have relevance all these years.
Sure, on the ground floor, if you will. And I would think, as time goes on and the new generation is much more focused on their health, much more concerned about what they're putting in their bodies. We see, from the whole evolution of organic and sourced, and not just from food, but to, as we were just saying, from a supplement perspective. I would think that would be a really an exciting ride to be on. And as I'm listening to you talk, it's just occurring to me just how much more goes into PR than probably people think about, as you're talking about personalities of the CEO, and that it's family owned, or that they're a big corporate conglomerate, or because the story that you need to tell has got to really, I think, be all inclusive, epistemic, if you will, to all that. On that note, for folks that are watching that maybe, they hear PR all the time, public relations, maybe they don't really understand what it is, or what's the difference between, say, PR and, say, experiential. Where experiential is one aspect that obviously plays into a PR campaign. Can you talk a little bit and expand a little bit on what the nuts and bolts of PR is?
Sure. I think, from an element of, PR is really that earned media. It's the opportunity for, someone to be able to, a brand, or even a personality, obviously, if it's a publicist, going out there, a brand can say they're great, but then when a reporter says this brand is great, or it gives, that validation and that way to really execute across that. So PR really takes that brand message and that brand promise and sends that out to the world, and is able through media relations, be able to have an opportunity where it's an honest review, and it's a way that media can tell that story on your behalf. So that's really where you do the delineation from advertising. Advertising, you can say, buy this, and here's the phone number, and you can track. Here we had 50 people call, we spent this kind of money. PR is much more about brand building. It's about trust. It's about those validations that happen throughout. And I think that's where you've seen it evolve even more so, where being able to have the spin that always gets thrown. Oh, it's just PR spin. That's something that we've always had to fight against. But now it's become so pervasive, where there's the different types of journalists you work with, different types of media that can help tell that story in a strong narrative way.
That's interesting. Because I feel like I feel that rather the PR plays into so much of our everyday lives that we're not even realizing it as consumers. Now, in many of your interviews, you say that networking and meeting people is the key to success. And really, that's the purpose of what we're doing here at EventSpeak. We're trying to connect people, in specific people in the event world. Now, it goes without saying that we live in pandemic America. And while we're starting to come out on the other side of it, it's been a very, very difficult year for everybody. So where meeting people and networking is key, what are the struggles you have experienced leading your company, leading your clients on these PR campaigns where we don't have the ability to get out and interact? Yes, we could do what we're doing now, and we're seeing more and more of that from virtual events and virtual conferencing and all that. But let's talk a little bit about the struggles that you've had to overcome for not only your clients, but as also leading your company through the pandemic, based off of what we were just saying there, with networking being so key.
Yeah, I think, it's interesting where we've pivoted really where everything is, virtual now and we feel for, at least in the next year, so many of our clients are still, planning to work from home and work remotely. So, what we've done a lot more of, the lifeblood too of any PR campaign is within those, opportunities to meet and talk to media. But we've done a lot more of the, I'll say virtual, sort of Zoom editor showcases where brands get launched via Zoom. The reporter gets their kit of here's the new products being launched. They sit through a Zoom and they're able to interact with with clients as well and with brands. I think that's the media are trapped just like us. So it's not like they're out having a separate life and we're all trapped. So this is a way for engagement and for them to be able to interact and have those types of ways for them to do their job. I think that's been one part of it. I'd say the other thing is you're seeing a lot more trust within media giving home addresses. We're able to ship, kits to them now. They can't say anymore, oh, it's in the mailroom or it's on my desk somewhere. So you're able to have, and especially with Amazon, you say, hey, I can see what your front door looks like now. Like I literally know that you got this product. So there's ways that you're seeing that trust happen. And I think the other thing is it's really humanized the experience because, as we're talking through this, people's dogs barking, their kid bursts in or whatever it is, you're having to see how people react versus in the past, be it at a trade show. Prim and proper, everyone's, you're paying attention, you're talking that way. There's a lot more elements of, understanding each other from that relationship side. And I think that's where there's some parallels, again, within the event space of really having to have that trust. And I think that, obviously the LinkedIn's of the world, the social media aspects that still are able to connect people, I think have been important because, having to find people where you used to be able to, again, go to a trade show or go to an event to be able to network. You have to find those opportunities now. And it's more probably work, but it's also, I think there's been a lot of, strong connections that have come out of this.
Absolutely. I think it seems, we've had friends of ours from Gamer Jibe and from Excel Events, and leading virtual event companies where it sounds like the ability to track and the connections that you're making that were once in a, going to a convention center in Florida or in Las Vegas, where now you have your team doing it virtually, and everybody they're interacting with, they're able to have a digital footprint with. And I think there's something to be said, of course, for having those one-on-one interactions in person or sharing a meal together. I think that what's happened is this has revolutionized, I think, a lot of the ways our business is going to move forward now, because I think companies are seeing that they don't have to spend a fortune sending a sales team out onto the road and paying for hotels and rental cars and per diem and all these other things where, yeah, maybe you're not getting quite the same interaction, but you're able to cover so much more space than you were in the past. Let's talk a little bit about some of the tougher clients that you've worked with, and in the sense that perhaps a brand that was in crisis. Most of the PR you've been involved in, we'd say, is a shining positive light on the brands that you work with. Have you been involved on a PR side where a brand was just really in trouble? You had to go into crisis mode. You had to help them out. And if you could walk us through a little bit about what that's like versus working, say, with a company that's got, they're ready to go. They're not in crisis mode.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. One, we've had in any plan or any client, we do put a crisis plan in place, so that we have, if God forbid anything happens. And we have had, some of these things happen even over the past year. We had a client that had some fatalities at an industrial manufacturing place. So, in the height of the pandemic, we were dealing with those types of crises. So it's important to have those things in place so that when things happen, it's not, a fire drill. You really want to make sure that you have your statements ready, your people ready, to really react that way. And we've also had a number of, I'll say, product recalls, which again can, in a crisis, depending on the size of the brand, that can make or break any number of brands. So it's really, having those aspects of having your statements ready, being able to make sure, especially with journalists, we've been pitching them and, we're chasing them so much, to your point on the positive side. And then when a crisis comes, if they come back to you and say, hey, we need to cover this, and then all of a sudden you say, hey, time out, I can't give a message or I can't talk to you, that's going to, that burns all those relationships and all that goodwill through the years. It's really having the aspects of having those things in place and making sure, any of your, be it brand spokespeople or even those statements, that they're ready to go so that there is an answer. Because the last thing you want to do is appear, chaotic in a crisis or avoid, that information and just hope stuff goes away, because there's so much more that happens now, especially with, social media. Obviously, things, your own internal teams, clients, their staff, anyone can, send out a tweet, and it's easy for anyone to really, capture that. So it's important to have those aspects going. And the other thing is, really to make sure that, you have media friendlies that are, ready, that you can have, that you've, built those relationships with, because I think those are ways that, they want to listen, they want to have the information go out correctly. And I think, there's a lot of layers. It could be from the trades, it could be from your local press, depending on the brand. Many times the local press is looking for information to be able to share in a crisis. So those are things that we've done. And we still do, it's still, even in this times, of making sure that, media are getting the information so they don't feel like they're in a vacuum or that they're, boxed out because it's not the right, time. We want to make sure that they're, brought into the fold to understand what's going on.
Sure. That makes perfect sense. And, it wouldn't have occurred to me until you said it, but I would imagine that even when you're working with a brand that is, as we said, going into that question, that seems to just be firing on all pistons and ready to go, you have to offer them a crisis plan. If we've learned anything in the last year, that anything can happen, and things are unpredictable. And where you're in charge of essentially steering a brand's public image, their public relations, that's something that I think would be very key. Now, you mentioned something, and I'm curious, like social media. There's 1,000 ways and different directions that brands can go these days. Is that something that you guys get involved in, as far as, a brand will come to you and say, Matt, like, we really need help identifying our social platforms, what direction we should be going, what's our demo, when are we supposed to be posting? Is social media strategy play into PR, or is that something more that you guys are working with a handshake to maybe an agency that specifically deals in that?
We work with agency partners. It's something that, we always feel that we're good at PR. We know the media relations, the blocking and tackling, all those aspects around it. We go into influencer work. We do have, some marketing aspects from our, our Santa Barbara office. But, in general, we like to have those agency partners that we can come in. I can, to your point earlier about a client that might be upset, I can defend and explain and, really walk through a PR strategy and a plan till I'm blue in the face. But social media has leveled the playing field where anyone can say, well, I didn't like that tweet or I didn't like that post. And I'm not, I can't go into the engagement. That's not my world. So having those agency partners that can stand, lockstep with you to be able to come from a strategic point of view, that's really invaluable. And they're good in their silo. And it's a way that we can work in concert so that it's helping the brands, but it's also they're living and breathing that every day. They're monitoring the traffic, the engagement, the reach, all those things where right. I think that really makes the most sense. And then, for a client, we look at it as those partnerships. It elevates it where you're getting that tenfold, type of level for a brand versus, someone trying to be a jack of all trades and you water down all your work then. And then, it's
Sure.
not a way to really help, manage a brand's, campaign in the long run.
Absolutely. I think that's really important these days when a lot of people are looking for that one-stop shop kind of thing. Meaning, like, you guys focus and specialize, and your forte is PR. Where you have I think it's also something that, we talk about a lot at Evolve and beyond. Like, it's our network that we really pride ourselves on. Meaning that, where you're specializing in PR or we're specializing in experiential activation, or, if you're looking for that right social media partner. We have agencies we work with that we can line you up with, kind of thing. Because I think it's important to recognize where your strengths are and where your weaknesses are, even from the agency perspective, so that you know how you can best service your clients. Now, we've been talking plenty about PR. We know that's what you do. We know that that's what you eat, breathe, and sleep. But now I'd be curious to know a little bit more about who Matt is. So we did a little research and just saw some past interviews with you, and married with a child, 2 dogs, correct?
Dogs, yes.
So talk to us a little bit about the shift in, I'm guessing prior to the pandemic, working from an office and leaving the house in the morning, coming home at night, to now where you're home with your family and your dogs. And how has that been as far as is it? I would imagine it's been challenging, at the same time been really beneficial because you can spend more time with them. And what kind of things are you guys getting to do together that you weren't before when you were stuck at the office?
Yeah, I think that, the biggest thing is, and I say, look, we're lucky that, my daughter's is 14 in 8th grade. So,
okay.
I'm not with, having to worry about, a toddler or a newborn or any of those things. So that's been fortunate. She, as the day starts, she goes off into her Zoom to, take her classes. And then I go off into my Zoom for this world. I think that, the upside is, to your point, the more time together, you've been able to do more elements. I think we're fortunate. Again, I live in Long Beach. There's still the opportunities to, walk out, see the water. I think for the kids as well, that they're able to get outdoors, go to the parks, go, where they don't feel trapped, obviously, in that regard. And I think the routines just changed. I think to your point, it was, you'd go to the office, be there all day, come home. But now it's, taking care of the dogs more, doing more of those things. So I think that's an element that, is invaluable. I think the opportunities to, have those, travel or trips or, family vacations obviously have stopped. But I think, we've looked for new ways to incorporate, things into our life as well. So, and if anything, I've learned how much heavy lifting, my wife does more than anything else. I get to see all the aspects, and, I just stay in my room all day and then come out.
You're like, I'll be in here working while you do all of that.
Exactly.
On that note, what are you, passionate about when it comes outside of your career? Are there things that you enjoy doing? Do you like to cook? Is there, sports that you follow? Like, give us a little insight about, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm born and raised Pittsburgh, so it's all things,
oh boy.
Steelers, Penguins, Pirates. So the Pirates are the thing that, keeps me grounded. So I know that not every team can win.
Hey, man, I'm from Chicago. I'm a Bears fan. I get it.
So I think that's a big part of it. I think that, is a great connection. Obviously it's, the routines of watching the games and all that stuff, but it still gives you that, passion as a fan to be able to see what's going on. And those were things in the past, my cousins and I would always do, road trips to, last year, right before the pandemic, we got to go to Toronto and see the Penguins play there. We've seen them play in Vegas, when they do that type of trip. So that's a way, you connect with family and friends in general. So I think that's something that is good. And I think, I take my dogs on, 100 walks. So, you have that type of just outdoor activities, and, experiencing, life through their eyes as well. So I think that's a big part of what I do.
Absolutely. I think that if nothing else, as now we're slowly seeing things start to come back to some sense of normalcy, it's going to give us so much more appreciation when we do get to do those trips again, when we do get to go back to a ball game, or where you can, take the dogs on a trip. What kind of dog? I love animals. I have 2 Siamese twins, cats, Linus and Lucy, that are 2 years old. I grew up around dogs, but love animals in general. But my cats have literally been my sanity through all of this last year. What kind of dogs do you have? What are their names?
2 French bulldogs. One's named Truffle and one's named Moo. Truffle's the actual mom of Moo. We got them together.
Did you say Moo?
Yeah. Moo. Moo looks like a cow. It's a white French bulldog with all kinds of black spots.
That's awesome.
Perfect name.
Man. Isn't it funny how those sort of things can just help keep us sane and keep us grounded? And like in those tough days when it can be overwhelming, sometimes it's just the simplest thing. I know sometimes I'll I'm here at home. It's basically just me and the cats, and I'll get into it. And some days are better than others when it comes down to dealing with stress. And Lucy will come up and drop the little play mouse that she likes to play with and give this meow, and she's just the happiest thing in the world just to play with this little toy mouse. Yeah. And it just brings me, I'm like, wow, here I am, like out of my head about thinking all these things, and I'm like, all this little creature wants is this little toy mouse and make her completely happy. I'm like, there's something that is very comforting in that to me. But Matt, listen, I really go right ahead.
That's a concern when we go back, is the animals are going to be in shell shock that we're not with them all the time.
I think we'll be in shell shock too. I mean, honestly,
those relationships.
I've been fortunate, knock on wood, that we've been able to keep busy enough through the pandemic and keep the lights on, if you will, and some of that is involved some travel when it's been possible, and I'm out of my mind, like missing them. When I'm away. My girlfriend lives in Miami, and we go back and forth a lot, to see each other. And while of course I'm thrilled to death to get down to Miami and spend time with her, my dad used to say the best part of going anywhere is coming home.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to seeing them, and my friend that watches them when I come home, and I'm like, send me pictures, how are they doing? Like, check it out. I'm like, there's some kids.
Yeah.
But well, clearly you with Truffle and Moo at home. But Matt, I want to just thank you for coming by the show today and talking with us. It's a pleasure to meet you. For our friends watching at home, once again, our guest today is Matt Kovacs, the president of Blaze PR. For those of you interested and want to know more about what Blaze does, or perhaps you have a PR campaign you're looking to employ, you can find them at blazepr.com. We'll continue the conversation, as always, over at EventSpeak, eventspeak.com. I'm still Big John, and this is still my show, EventSpeak with Big John. Thank you for joining us today, Matt. All of you at home, thank you for watching. And always a constant reminder, guys, now more than ever, to please take care of yourselves and each other. We'll see you next time.